even though I had survived my suicide attempt, I still hadn't addressed any of the reasons why I'd tried to kill myself. Oh shit, last time you were like this, you killed yourself. Run away, run away, run away. And so how did I run away? The only ways that I knew how to run away were in alcohol. The doubts that you have after a long-term serious injury in your own physical body, it can be crippling. You know, you hesitate going into tackles. You might, slow up a little quicker, jump out of something. You might avoid this. I mean, I didn't have full flexion in my leg for, it was probably another 18 months. What do you say to anyone who's experiencing those things? You must have someone to give you objectivity. I sit here now in front of you guys. I'm the most capable and competent that I've ever been in my life. If I had this level of self-awareness and understanding, this level of seeking, openly seeking, actively seeking objectivity and trying to apply that in my life, I would have had an incredible career, a far better career than I actually had. You know, I think that's something because I'm just some kid from Preston, of very, very moderate ability. All I could do was head it and kick it. But if there was a fly on the wall in any dressing room, 24/7 camera in any dressing room, 90% of footballers would be cancelled right now.
Yeah, you'd all be locked
up. They would. People don't speak honestly about what's honestly being said in the dressing room.
Can I touch on, obviously, coming to retirement, how you handled the transition from retiring?
Terribly. When the year before, you're on £9 a week, and then all of a sudden you go from that to £1 a week, it's a huge drop. You know, it was a massive drop. Even though all of that was prepped and ready, and you say I was ready for retirement, I was not ready. I was not ready for the transition. How long can I drive my eyes closed? How long can I drive my lights off? How fast can I go with my eyes closed? Do you know what? I could just drive this car into that bridge there. Oh, I could drive this car into that. And they were not only were they becoming more frequent, but they were getting greater in their intensity.
I want to talk about Sporting Chance because that's are they a private? I know Tony Adams set them up.
Yeah.
You went there 2003.
I did, yeah.
So that is similar to what we were just talking about, a support system. Firstly, who sent you there? Did you take yourself there? And any advice for any players who are currently drinking, stuff like that, who might be considering taking themselves there, might have had the conversation but been reluctant to do it? How was it for you? Did it help? A little bit of...
Yeah, Sporting Chance is private. It's effectively like the treatment arm of the PFA that's been outsourced to Tony Adams' clinic, and they're outstanding. They really are. It was where I met one of my first true friends in life there. He was the chief executive. It was called Peter Kay, the chef. He passed away a few years back. A phenomenal man. One of the first people I ever felt I could be truly honest with, which is a rarity, you know, especially at that point, having been in football so long. What was it like for me? I was one of the first people to go through there for a full 28-day rehab. So there was only me on my own. So I had one-to-one counselling, I had training 3 times a week, and I went in actually because I've been out, I had my injury in 2001, and I got back to fitness 2003. But what had happened in this time, even though physically I was applying myself every day to get fit, emotionally, I was all over the place. I didn't understand that I was all over the place, but emotionally I was all over the place because even though I had survived my suicide attempt, I still hadn't addressed any of the reasons why I'd tried to kill myself. So I'm on this 2-year journey of physically applying myself every day, but getting back and emotionally thinking that I was a failure, thinking that, you know, that I was incapable and that I had this little guilty secret. Now, I compartmentalized it, but what I found out subsequently, and I only found this out 2018, was any time that I had any kind of setback, or any time that I didn't feel like my rehab was progressing, and I got this overwhelming fear or anxiety about whether I'd make it at all. This fear, this anxiety would build up in me, and I didn't know what to do with it. And my brain was like, oh shit, last time you were like this, you killed yourself. Run away, run away, run away. And so how did I run away? The only ways that I knew how to run away were in alcohol, because it had worked for me as a kid. You know, I started drinking on Bent Lane Park at 11 years of age, you know, and it was something that I used to do frequently with my friends there. It was something that I used to do Tuesday, Saturday when I got into football, because that was the culture. That was what lads did to bond. And you didn't just drink, you got absolutely battered, because that's what we did. And I kind of enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because, you know, a lot of people get, when they're alcoholics, they're addicted to alcohol. So they can't function without it of a morning. That wasn't my experience with alcohol. I've never been, this is where actually I kind of vary from the standard dialogue around addiction. I think unless you are physically, biologically addicted, then you're not an addict. You have maladaptive or problem coping strategies. And that's where I was. There was a point in drinking where it wasn't that my problems were solved, it was that I didn't care about them anymore. You know, so you get to about, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 pints in, and the worry that I had about what was going on in my life disappeared. I didn't care about that anymore. It wasn't fixed, but I didn't feel the weight of responsibility of it. And that was the point that I loved. It was almost like a psychological or mental freedom. But obviously at that point, you're battered. You know, so your decision making is impaired as well. And I was the guy who was strolling down the A4 at 5 o'clock in the morning looking for a petrol station that was still open so I could buy some beer. Not because I desperately needed to drink more, but I didn't want this feeling to go away. I didn't want this moment of freedom to go away. And bizarrely, when you're experiencing that freedom at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, everyone else is in bed.
Yeah.
So you do have a physical freedom. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a bit warped, but it works. And those early hours of the morning, they were my sanctuary. But I could only ever be in them battered.
Yeah.
Otherwise, logically, it made no sense. So that's why I kept drinking. It was to escape these emotions, and it was to get to that point where I didn't care about them anymore. And you know, my creeping crept up from 2 days a week to 3 to 4 to 5, and I was like, I'll never drink the day before a game. Never drink the day before a game. And then what happens when you get that far deep? I did drink the day before a game. And
but what were you masking at this stage? Because in my head here, I'm thinking you've got over your injury. So you've got your identity back. You're back playing where QPR, Watford, maybe at this stage.
No, still at QPR.
You're still at QPR.
Yeah.
So your life is back to normal as such. So when you say that I'm trying to get rid of them thoughts and get lost in your emotions, stuff like that, and have that freedom from anything in particular, or
Still suffering from the guilt of...
I'm still suffering right from that trauma. You know, there's... Like you said, John, there is a guilt and a shame that comes with the action that I've done that no one knows about. It's my guilty little secret. There's this notion of freedom that I experience in drink, you know, that I experience at a certain point. Just because that incident is 2 years behind me, it doesn't mean that the insecurities and the thoughts don't come to me each day, each night. And you were talking, you know, you mentioned just before about people not understanding what happens in football, and if you're in football you will experience some kind of adversity. That adversity doesn't have to be major trauma. You know what a lot of people don't get is yeah, you're in a team of 40, you're in a squad of 40 every day. These guys are your first opponents. So when you go into training every day, they're my mates, but I must be better than them every day. So you've got kind of micro interactions that feed your emotional journey on a daily basis. If you're the butt of a joke, you might feel like you've been put down a bit. If you're the butt of a joke and everyone laughs and it becomes an ongoing thing, then you're continually getting stepped on each day. On a professional basis, you're doing a training session, and one day you're with this group, and then all of a sudden the next day you've got a bib on, you're with this group, and you're like, oh shit, what does that mean? Does it mean I'm not playing on Saturday? Does it mean that there's only 2 months left to the season? My contract's up. Does that mean the gaffer doesn't rate me? You're constantly fighting this self-justification with questions that you can't have answered. So, just in those 2 examples, if this guy makes a joke of you and it's a club captain, you can't then turn around and say, hey, John, does everyone feel like that? Does everyone think that I'm a bit of a knob, or does everyone feel that they're better? You're not going to have that conversation. You're going to go home and you're going to work it through in your mind. And then the next day at training, you're going to look for evidence. You're going to look for evidence of whether other people do think less of you. And then this guy makes 3 people a cup of tea and not you. And you're like, shit, people do think like that about me. And you're constantly searching for this evidence that justifies or validates you. That's within your peer group. It happens the same in training. We're doing some crossing and shooting. Me and you, prop. There's only 5 of us in the session. I'm a centre half. I score 9 goals. You score 2. You're like, shit, what's going on here? I'm supposed to be a striker.
Yeah.
And then we have another crossing and shooting session the next day. I'm like, hey, Brock, I'm top goal scorer in training. And you're like, all right, I'm going to have to show him today. I score 10, you score 1. You're like, oh, shit. This guy's exposing. You're going through constant battles of self-justification. You can't come into the changing room and say, oh, Clarke, you scored loads today, but you still think I'm a good striker, right? Don't you?
Yeah.
You're not going to say that, are you?
No.
You're not going to go say, do you reckon the gaffer thinks that I'm a terrible striker now because I didn't score in training today? You're not going to go and get and search that objective input into your inner turmoil. And that's what I was fighting every day. So on a micro level, professionally, on a micro level with my peers, on a professional level, on a personal level with my own injury. The doubts that you have after a long-term serious injury in your own physical body, they can be crippling. You hesitate going into tackles. You might, slow up a little quicker, jump out of something. You might avoid this. I mean, I didn't have full flexion in my leg it was probably another 18 months after I'd gotten back. So I didn't want to go to ground. But me, as a centre-half, Brock, I was all about smashing people.
Yeah.
But how can you smash people without going to ground? I had to develop a new way, which I did, Johnny. You'd be glad to know. But the doubt that you have in yourself, when you're doubting your ability to perform, it translates in an inability to perform. And that's what I was fighting on a daily level. The smallest things were magnified in my head because I never had any objectivity to it. So coming back to John's question earlier, what do you say to anyone who's experiencing those things? You must have someone to give you objectivity. You must. My advice would be, get yourself a therapist. A therapist is a safe space because they're not invested in your ego. They're not invested in your happiness. They're invested in understanding you and keeping you well. They're invested in helping you to work through those things that don't make sense in your brain. Some people suggest friends, some people suggest family. I don't suggest them first because your friends and your family are invested in your happiness. When you share a problem with them, they're more likely to minimize it and say, oh, don't worry, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as this. It's not as bad as that. Or if it's your mates more often, they'll say, oh, don't worry about it. Let's go out. Let's go and have a dance, have a couple of pints. You'll forget about it. I don't want to minimize what I'm going through. I don't want to avoid what I'm going through. I need to manage it, understand it and manage it. And you can only do that in a professional space. And the amazing thing about therapy is once you get past that point of understanding, you know, let's say your adverse mental health and your problems, it starts to underpin your successful behaviours in life. You know, I sit here now in front of you guys. I'm the most capable and competent that I've ever been in my life. If I had this level of self-awareness and understanding, this level of seeking, openly seeking, actively seeking objectivity and trying to apply that in my life, I would have had an incredible career, a far better career than I actually had. And you know, I think that's something because I'm just some kid from Preston of very, very moderate ability. All I could do was head it and kick it. But if I had an understanding of what my strengths were and, you know, how to interact and make choices that were better for me as opposed to choices that I think you wanted me to make, I would have had a very, very different career.
Do you know, I think it's fascinating in the midst of all this, like you were still, and I know you try and downplay it a bit because I've heard you talk about it in the past, but you were still Britain's brainiest footballer.
What does that even mean, by the way? I've seen that.
Well,
how does that work? How does that work?
I won a game show. That's all it means.
You got to meet Carl Vorderman.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was a lifelong ambition.
Yeah, still is one man.
I've been a Countdown fan since I was yay high. And I'll tell you how it came about. When I was injured, I was trying to look for something to fill my time because I was drinking too much. So I started a maths A-level, started a law A-level, and I thought I'd apply for Countdown, to go on Countdown because it had been a dream. Because one of the producers, no, that's the second step. So I applied to go on Countdown and they had an audition at a hotel in London and I failed the audition. I failed, absolutely panicked. Well,
what does the audition entail? Like a mini version of it?
No, in a meeting room, you're there with 20 other people and someone at the front reads letters out to you. Right, your letters are A, B, C, D, E, F, go. Right. And I was like, this isn't Countdown. Where's my clock? Where's my board? Where's Carol? And so I flunked that audition. But then it came after that. There was a memo that went around football clubs. There was a series called Britain's Brainiest. And they wanted to do Britain's Brainiest Footballer. And they'd done estate agent, nurse, blah, blah, blah. And you just go on this quiz show, basically. And I thought, reeling from failing the Countdown audition, I thought, do you know what, I'll have a pop at this. And I went on that and I won. It was just me against 12 other guys on a quiz show.
12 other footballers?
Yeah. Current and former footballers, yeah. Just buzzing that Alan Brazil was one of them. Because,
at least you know you won't come last.
Well, my specialist subject was human anatomy,
right?
And his was horse racing of the 60s. Oh, brilliant! So that's how that came about. But again, it's going back to what you were saying, Proc. Even though they tried to beat it out of me at Blackpool. I was never ashamed of you know, I want to say intellect, but just my desire to know things.
Yeah.
I was never ashamed of that. You know, I always ask questions. At Blackpool as a YT, they nearly beat it out of me, you know, because they're like, oh, look at Smarty Pants, look at you, you know, you're too polite for football.
I said it's the same now. It's not cool. It's not cool to. You just have to be a footballer. You have to be into certain things that footballers are into. You can't stray away from the norm. And like, luckily enough, you've stuck to your guns there and been like, no, I will do Countdown. I will do Question Time. I will do this, and this, and I'll be me, and everybody else can
they can work around it. Yeah. Well, I didn't know that 16 to 20 though, and you know, we're speaking about this outside, and I think that's such an important section of a player's life, because you've just come from school and you're straight into a work environment. You don't have any real sense of self or full identity. You're still a school child. And then you come into this environment where basically the expectations of how you will behave, they're imposed upon you. And so I went in there you know, we'll talk manners and respect, you know, education, all of these things. And I went in there trying to show my intellect. You know, I thought it was a good thing to show. But the coaches used to ridicule me, and they would intentionally try and trip me up to humiliate me, especially in front of the senior players, so that I would talk less and ask less. You know, how is that right?
Yeah.
You know, what that taught me going into this environment, not just of adults, but of adults who I want to be like. You know, especially the first teamers. I want to be you. I want to be in your position. So when you're humiliated in front of everyone, like it just creates conformity. You have a choice at that point to either confront or conform. And at 16 or 17 years of age, if you confront, you're seen as a bad egg, and you're out on your ear. So if you want to stay in the industry, you do as people say, you do what they expect of you, you do no more, but you definitely do no less. And those expectations obviously come on a playing sense, but dependent on the culture and the environment of the club, they also come in a social sense. So when I'm on the team bus and I'm reading a book at 16 years of age, or 17 it would have been, and I'm getting absolutely battered from all the senior players, I can guarantee the next time I'm on that bus, I'm not going to read a book.
No, no way.
You know, so, and we go out on a Tuesday night, and my curfew, because I'm living in Diggs, is 10 a.m, and I leave to meet my curfew, and the next day I get absolutely battered by all the senior players. You can guarantee the next time we go out, I'm not going to meet my curfew at 10.
No.
Because I need their approval. I need to be accepted by them so that I can get into that fold and emulate them. So it's really important what the daily culture and environment is in what, you know, what it's breeding in our next generation of young players.
At our football club at the minute, we've got a canteen and we've got a bookshelf with loads of books on.
Awesome.
And people have brought books in. But I still haven't seen anyone read a book yet.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they're scared to, you know, be the first person to sit there in front of everyone and read a book, because they don't want to be the lick arse to the manager, to the people that are there. Oh, you're only reading it because the managers haven't done it at the same time and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? So
it's really hard to break a culture. You know, I did it, and I think I did it well at Northampton. And there are certain prerequisites to being able to break culture if you're going to do it as an individual. And one of them is you can't be 16 or 17 years of age.
Yeah.
You're not going to have any kind of social respect from the group for the actions that you're doing. But when I went into Northampton at 31 years of age, that's a very different dynamic. I'm off the back of, you know, pretty established career. I was chairman of the PFA. So I went in there and I had the opportunity to instigate change. And the way I did it, it wasn't confrontational. Well, Northampton was still very much in that standard banter environment. Yeah. You know, football club banter. You know, they talk about what's acceptable language and behaviour. If there was a fly on the wall in any dressing room, 24/7 camera in any dressing room, 90% of footballers would be cancelled right now.
Yeah, you'd all be locked.
You know, they would. People don't speak honestly about what's honestly being said in the dressing room. But when I was in there, I was really on this wave of, you know, maybe trying to address culture and environment. And when lads said anything that was, you know, either racist, discriminatory or homophobic, I just shouted from wherever I was, "Kick it out!" And everyone would start laughing. Yeah. You know, and start laughing. And then next time, kick it out.
I think I remember that.
And then after that, other lads started to do it to other lads.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it kind of developed a trend of something that was started persistently, but in a kind of, you know, jocular fashion, actually became the adopted behaviour. And lads started to call each other out on just open banter discrimination. So then what I started to do was, because I think that you address things with discourse. The only way you get through things is by openly and honestly discussing them between people. because then I get to hear what you mean. You get to hear what I mean. We get some common ground. We don't have to agree. We just hear and understand each other, broaden our horizons. So what I used to do was, whenever there was any kind of confrontation in the dressing room, or more usually, if anyone was in some kind of foul mood, or not in a place where they're ready for training, it was usually Biak in Fenway. Do you remember Biak in Fenway? So it'd be like, B, what's going on? I'd be like, Clarke, you don't know what this shit is that I'm dealing with. So I tell you what, mate, we'll go training, but after training, let's go and have a coffee. Tell me all about it. Talk about compartmentalisation. He'd be like, yes, my general. He would box that off. He'd come and give us 2 hours of great training, but then we'd have to go and have a coffee. So that we could open that box and have a chat about what it was he's talking about. So started this coffee club after training. And it started from me just asking people for coffees to discuss whatever it was that was going on. But then it became a social interaction. Like half a dozen of us would go every day. Younger lads didn't want to come with us, so they started to go to Costa because we got a Starbucks. But you create this platform where, because I prompted it on discussion, lads would go there and they would discuss. And that's the way you start to change culture. You minimize the negative emotional, psychological interactions in the workplace. You address and bring people on board about calling each other out. And you create a place to discuss whatever it was that was going on. And I think it's very simple, but there are certain criteria that's needed to be able to introduce it as an individual. And one of them is age.
I'd agree, because I would say the age I'm at now in a football club, I can openly do whatever I want. For example, on Team Bus, if I want to get my laptop out and do some work, if I want to read a book, if I want to get my iPad out and study for an exam, whatever, you won't get too much said. People now realise that you're looking ahead to the future, and that's okay. Whereas back in the day, probably when I was 19, when I started a business degree, and I was doing that on the bus then, even the staff would come to the back and in other words, pretty much say, put your laptop away, like, what you're doing, concentrate on the game, like, go and sit at the back, play cards, like that sort of stuff. Whereas now, nobody would say that to me, and also if they did, I'd have a perfect response to say, basically, fuck off. Like, pretty much, you've got to look after yourself. And I think I'm a figure now who people will look at and also listen to, whereas when you're younger, you're not. And I try and get that message across to the young lads now, to be like, look, when I was younger, I was scared to do this, this, and this because of what people thought. Don't be that person. Get out, study this, read this, test yourself, find, as we said, your identity away from football. And definitely think age is a big factor in that, to become someone who is comfortable in your own body and your own mind, to be like, look, you know what, I want to do this, so I'm going to do it, regardless of what everyone else in the changing room thinks. But it's difficult to change the perception from a young kid trying to do that.
Well, I think one of the points we need to get across to young players is that even though this group seems so important to you right now, this group is transient. And your interactions with my interactions with you at Preston, I would count them as single serving. They're single serving, because I was there for 6 months. And then I leave, and immediately, because I'm playing for an opponent, you become my enemy. We're not going to talk like best mates, we're going to stop going to dinner and all the rest of it. Even though they seem so large and so weighted, these people, you should not put credence on their opinion of you. You should not put weight of your teammates' opinion of you on yourself. You should have a council around you of people whose opinions matter, and you need to know who they are. Name them, because once you name whose opinion matters in your life, that's when you're able to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's when you're able to go on social media, see a negative comment, take the information, but not feel invested in, I have to convince that person that they're wrong, I have to interact, I have to respond or whatever. there are only certain opinions that matter in your life. And when you get into a football club, your teammates aren't them.
No.
It's the coach and the gaffer.
Yeah.
You know, so no matter what goes on here, don't have that impact your self-esteem and your validation.
Which is tough, because them teammates are your best friends for a year, 2 years, whatever your contract is. Yeah. They are not 24 hours a day, six days a week. You see them more than you see your missus, your kids, your mum, your dad. They are your best friends. And then at the end of that year, whatever your contract length, like you said, you don't speak again. You don't see each other again. We can all count on one hand how many friends we got in football, real friends. And it's a shame, because there's probably not many industries like that where you're competing with your best friends as such. And we are just colleagues. And as you said, you can't focus too much on them opinions, because ultimately they won't matter in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years time.
It's not their opinions that matter, it's enjoying the relationship. If you enjoy the interaction, carry it on, but don't put weight on the opinion.
Well, just like you only played with Proc for 6 months, but you had a massive effect on him, whether you knew it at the time or not, because like you said, you was one of the first people that was changing how he was as a person, like being a player in the team that is focusing on academics and stuff like that. And Proc learns a lot from you. So even though players won't realise it, the effect that they're having with the way they act as a person, it does have an effect on the younger players, and they take little things from each person. I
think there's so many different characters in the dressing room, which you can take so much from them all. Little snippets of each person, and not mold yourself into that person, but take positives and negatives from each character of how to be, how to behave, how to study, how to treat your missus, how to look after your kids, how to be on a football pitch. There's so much you can learn, because there's so many different backgrounds in a group.
I worry sometimes for some younger players that see a older player that's had a good footballing career, and they look up to them because they've had a good footballing career and they want to be like them. But they've got so many bad traits, this experienced player, that the young player rubs off on the young player, and then they haven't had the career that they've had. So they're not going to reach the career they've had with the bad traits that they're going to learn from this experienced player.
Do you know what it normally is?
It's a really good point.
It's normally the drinking and the gambling. That's what I find. I see young lads now probably worse than ever in terms of gambling.
Do you think it's because it's online? Do you think it's because it's so acceptable on your phone?
For sure. On the bus, is it gambling? Changing rooms, gambling.
Is it cards? How is it? How's it
manifesting
phones,
itself?
Yeah,
phones. Cards. Everyone's still playing cards, but the clubs I've been at, cards, that's just been a bit of banter. There's no big cash flying about. It's nothing serious like that. But phones for gambling and drinking, like you said, it's not acceptable for the older guys, but it's the younger ones you worry about, because they might see, someone's 31, 32, he's had an unbelievable career. Oh, he gambles every day. I'll do it as well. And they're the ones that you need to really be careful of, the younger lads who are getting involved in that.
Clarke, can I touch on, obviously, coming to retirement, how you handle the transition from retiring?
Terribly. There's no other word for it. I mean, well, we've talked about it, I have this academic aspect to myself. I studied for a degree in broadcasting, and as PFA chairman, I'd been doing so much media, whether it was interviews or going on Question Time, like you said, news nights, stuff like that. And I found that it worked well with me. It doesn't always work well for people, no matter how qualified you are. I worked well on camera, and also people responded to it. People liked what I was doing, so I thought, okay, that could be the way I go. Studied for a degree in broadcasting with an aim to go into punditry, and then I was just in order to get practice, I was taking all the punditry and commentary offers that I was getting, just for one-off hits.
Did you do that degree after you retired?
No, it's just while I was playing. Okay. Yeah, it's while I was playing. And I was taking, all these offers, all and sundry. And then I started to work with Sam Matterface at ITV, and ITV said, do you know what, we think you and Sam work well together. Will you carry on doing all this stuff, you know, all the odd jobs that you're doing for a year? But we'd like you to prioritise working with Sam if those opportunities come up. I was like, okay, we'll try that. So we did that, and this was my final year when I was at Northampton. And it was going really well. And ITV said, we will give you a contract, a 2-year contract at ITV to be a co-commentator with Sam Matterface to go to Brazil in 2014, do the World Cup. And I still had a year left at Northampton. And but at Northampton, I'd gone down to £1,000 a week, which was, I know, so it's a wonderful income. Please don't get me wrong, 50 grand a year is a decent job. When the year before you're on 9 grand a week, and then all of a sudden you go from that to 1 a week, it's a huge drop. You know, it was a massive drop. We're having to cut off left, right, and centre, anything and everything. But then ITV said, we'll give you a contract, 100 grand a week, 100 grand a year, and you can still do other media things. So I was like, that's an absolute no-brainer. You know, doubling my football salary with an opportunity to earn more and a chance to go through to the World Cup. So I was like, right, yeah, this is it. I'm retiring. And even though I'd prepared for it, so I got myself qualified in a you know, a new job. I'd lined up a job. You were ready to just go straight into it? I was ready to go into it. I still had a year left at football, so it wasn't like football kicked me out. Yeah. You know, I went out on my turn, my time. I mean, my last ever game was a playoff final at Wembley, and we lost. But I thought, you know what, it's a good place to go out at Wembley. Yeah, so I'll do that. I went in to do the commentary with Sam, and even though all of that was prepped and ready, and you say I was ready for retirement, I was not ready. I was not ready for the transition. There is very little that can prepare you for going from that totally all-consuming structure of football to overnight not having any. Nothing prepares you for that. You know, I still had family life to tend to, you know, so taking the kids to school and whatnot. But it's so much more, because all of your habits are ingrained in that. You know, all of my eating habits, all of my sleeping habits, all of the way that I interact with fellow human beings, everything was ingrained in football. And even though I've moved into this job where I was doing comms probably twice a week, so I was working 2 days a week, the other 5 days were just like, meh. Yeah. And I'd stroll around, and literally in that first year, and this says something for the industry of football and how it's perceived. In that first year, someone said to me, you used to be Clarke Carlisle. No, I still am. I just don't play football. Yeah. You know, once you drop off that radar, the drop in value of you to other people is just utterly incredible. You know, you are obsolete overnight. And
what do you think it was, the main thing? Do you think it was the identity? Do you think it was the purpose?
100%. Brock, it was those two things that you mentioned there, purpose and identity. Football is not just a game or a sport. It was a childhood passion that grew into me living a dream, that grew into becoming my external identity and value. And when you take that away, not externally I was less than, but also internally I was less than, because football is who I was. It wasn't what I did. I never drew that distinction. And then taking away that purpose, no matter where you are in football, no matter what club, there is a collective purpose that you are working towards. And then it's to win on a Saturday. You've got a week by week purpose. But then as the season goes on, that grows into a wider purpose, whether it's working for a promotion, trying to get a playoff place, trying to avoid relegation. So there is always a continuing and evolving purpose that makes your Saturday to Saturday more important, which makes your Monday to Friday more important, you know? And then you drop that off. There was nothing important about me commentating on football matches.
No.
And actually, what I found was I was actually a bit bitter. I was a bit bitter with commentating, especially when we were doing Premier League and European matches. Especially doing European matches, because I never got to play in Europe. And I'm commentating on some of these lads, and I was watching, I was thinking, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm sat here commentating.
Yeah, my immediate response wanted to be to call them out. That's terrible. You know, what on earth are they doing? But you don't want to. You've got to balance it. And I felt this bitterness growing in me, especially because Sam doing all the incredible research he does. Like, just signed a 75 grand a week contract. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
What for? Yeah. It's Barnet. You know, and I felt this bitterness growing in me. So you've got the loss of identity, you've got the loss of value, you've got the loss of purpose, you've got this bitterness and resentment growing in me at what is going on at the top of the game, where I feel I might fit. And what you have to throw into the mix at the moment is I'm still heavily invested in self-justification. All of my thought processes are still running in a monologue in here, not getting any objectivity, any support, even though at this point I knew I had depression.
So at this point, does it have like a little bit of a flashback of when you got injured in 2002 to you losing your identity to now you're retired, and then leading to 2014 where you put yourself in front of the lorry?
That's it. Yes, and when you say flashbacks, I don't get. Even though I know now that the feelings are the same, I didn't know that at the time. I'm still running through my own thoughts, and what I should have become aware of was my deteriorating self-talk. This is really important for people to understand. When we talk about suicidal ideation, not a lot of people understand what ideation is. Yeah, they think, oh well, I thought I didn't want to be here last week. Does that mean I'm suicidal? Look, everyone gets intrusive thoughts. Everyone. And according to science, 87% of people get harmful intrusive thoughts, about wanting to hurt themselves. Having a passing intruding thought is nothing to worry about. You're just going to an altercation, I just wish the ground had swallowed me up. Everyone gets that thought. The difference is when you start to ruminate on that thought. Ideation is very different to a passing thought. So let's say me and Proc are having an argument, and I think, I could just poke you in the eye, Proc. It doesn't mean I've assaulted him. It doesn't mean I'm going to assault him. It doesn't mean I'm a nasty person. But if I walk away from that interaction and I think, I would do it with this finger. And then I get in the car and I think, I'm going to do it on a Tuesday. Yeah. And then I get home and I think, and when I do it, I'm going to say this and he's going to say that. Now that's ideation. Yeah. That's when you start to repeatedly think on something with the practicalities or practical logistics around it. And I didn't understand that difference. Nor did I understand that I didn't understand dysfunctional thinking patterns. I thought the way I thought was the way that everyone thinks. I didn't understand that there were helpful and unhelpful ways of thinking. I didn't understand that I could change the way that I was thinking. And catastrophic thinking and ideation on harm were growing massively in this time. My first year at ITV. Because you got to imagine spending hours and hours and hours on the road. We're going to games up and down the country. I'm driving down the A1, coming home from, Tottenham, back up. I was living at York at the time, so I'm doing like 6-hour drives, 12 hours driving in a day. And I'm driving in this car, and my thinking, my goodness, especially at night time, like, how long can I drive my eyes closed? How long can I drive my lights off? How fast can I go with my eyes closed? Do you know what? I could just drive this car into that bridge there. I could drive this car into that. And they were not only were they becoming more frequent, but they were getting greater in their intensity. And there was nothing within me that like flagged. That was like, oh, what are you thinking that for?
Yeah, so no rationalisation of my kids, my missus, absolutely nothing whatsoever.
I think that that thinking shows like end of the descent.
Okay.
So there comes to a point, and the point came when I was walking around York, and I truly believed that I was a waste of space. And when you talk about no thinking of your kids, I did think about my kids, but my logic, my logical compass was wrong. It was broken. You know, I was in a severe depressive episode. So the rationalizations that I came to were warped. You know, if I've got a camera, let's say, or a compass that's 3 degrees out, and I'm trying to position this thing on site, it doesn't matter at what point and what angle that I look at this thing that I'm trying to measure, I will always be 3 degrees out because my compass is broken.
Yeah.
And that's what it was in this scenario with my thinking. Because I was in such a severe depressive episode that I wasn't taking any medication for, my psychological compass was broken. And I was looking at what the impacts for my kids would be. And I was like, well, actually, my kids are embarrassed of me.
Yeah.
They're going to be relieved that I'm gone. My wife, she will financially be better if I'm not here. Mm-hmm. My parents are ashamed of me. They'll be relieved that I'm gone. If I do it now, then I can be buried just in between Christmas and New Year, and it doesn't ruin anyone's Christmas.
Wow, that's a lot of...
Do you get what I mean? So you know, they're the answers that I'm coming to that right now just seem so warped, but they made sense to me in the moment. And you know, I genuinely believe that I was stealing oxygen from someone who deserved it.
Do you think retirement and transition highlighted that fact? Do you think it made your problems worse because of it, or do you think regardless of playing football, not playing football, having a plan, having a future career, you were heading down that route regardless?
I think that no matter what industry that I'd have gone into, when I experienced significant trauma, I would have responded in a similar way to how I did in 2001. So, because it's all about emotional management, responses, and coping mechanisms. So I think I would have responded in that way. But that's not to say that the traumas that I went through in football were so significant that they brought things to a head probably quicker than would have happened in other walks of life. Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, that moment of retirement and transition, it was huge for me. But it was huge because, just like John alluded to right at the beginning at the top of the show, it was huge for me because I hadn't done any work on my management and armouring myself for something like that. Because I didn't have any emotional coping strategies, because I didn't understand my self-identity and my worth in society, because I didn't understand who I was and what I mean to people around me, football meant more than me, you know, and avoiding emotional pain, emotional trauma meant more than me physically surviving or dealing or manage with emotional pain and trauma. So I came to a really, really bad decision to put myself in front of a truck. And again, you know, you dehumanize these things. I didn't even think about the truck driver. That guy's life is irreversibly changed because of the choice that I made, you know? The impact of that psychologically and emotionally on my kids, on my ex-wife, on my family. There are huge impacts, a lot of them negative. There have been, because of the way that I engage with my recovery from there, because I did go into psych hospital, I did take the right medication. I did not only go to therapy, but I engaged with therapy like I engaged with my rehab from my knee injury. I thought, if I'm going to do this and there's hope, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to listen to what you say. I'm going to try and implement it in my life. And because I did that, it's actually transformed a lot of lives in my family. Because I can't do it on my own when I do that, Pro.
And do you know what? I think you've transformed a lot of lives, as you said before, outside of your family. I think there will be people you've never spoke to, never heard from, that will be so thankful for you and thankful for the shit that you went through, because that's now helping them. That's no benefit to you that you went through that, but it's helping a lot of other people. And I think, like, obviously it's amazing that we've had you in to hear that. It's amazing to see you in such a good place for a number of years now. Like you said, you feel like you're in the best place ever. Your clarity is like amazing. And I think the work that you're doing at the university, in football, at football, in the corporate world, the messages are so strong regarding a lot of things. You're sort of a walking, talking evidence for footballers.
You won't even know that reference, mate.
No. in terms of drinking, gambling, retirement, transition, mental health, but also the positives of how to turn your life around and now be successful, and also having the will to succeed, overcoming injuries, overcoming rehab, overcoming probably the darkest days you could ever go through. I think there's so many messages there for a different audience of people.
Yeah, so much. And we've actually missed loads out as well because of the times as well. We could have kept it here for ages, but it was, honestly, it was an absolute pleasure. And I'm so thankful that we got the chance to bring you on here today.
Thank you for having me.
And on 2 questions.
One question, I think. Two questions then. Firstly, your biggest high in football. And then secondly, one piece of advice for current footballers.
Just going through a tough time.
Yeah, regarding transition mainly, because I think that's where you struggled as well.
Biggest high in football, I experienced a lot of good highs. Winning championship playoff final, Wembley, being man of the match, incredible. Singing the national anthem to being called up for England, incredible. But the first goal that I scored on my home league debut for Blackpool as a 17-year-old kid, a 91st minute winner against Carlisle United. Mate, talking about that today makes my hair stand up on end.
You haven't got none.
The hair's on my back. Incredible moment. It was like a first, people talk about their first hit that makes them, addicted to whatever. That was my first football hit, scoring a 91st minute goal in a league game, a winner in front of a crowd, mum, dad and granddad in the crowd. It was an incredible moment, incredible. My advice to anyone going through any difficulties, you don't have to be like me. You don't have to tell everybody, but please hear me. It's imperative that you tell somebody, and the right somebody.
Thank you very much, Clarke.
Amazing.